Did you know that the aliens in It Came from Outer Space were never fully shown on purpose because the director wanted you to be more afraid of what you couldn't see than what you could? This black and white science fiction movie from 1953 changed the way Hollywood thought about creatures from other worlds. It wasn't about monsters attacking cities. It was about fear, loneliness, and what happens when the unknown lands in your backyard. The desert became a character. The darkness hid secrets, and the audience sat closer to the edge of their seats than ever before. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about It Came from Outer Space. Number 20. A poet wrote the aliens. Most alien movies back then were written by screenwriters who loved action and explosions. But It Came from Outer Space came from the mind of Ray Bradbury, one of the greatest poets and storytellers America ever had. He didn't write a script at first. He wrote something called a treatment, which is like a long story outline. Bradbury loved the desert. He grew up exploring dry, empty places in California, and he poured all that loneliness and wonder into his story. The aliens in his treatment weren't evil. They were lost. They were scared. They just wanted to fix their ship and go home. That was a brand new idea in 1953. Most movies showed aliens as monsters who wanted to destroy Earth. But Bradbury saw them differently. He imagined what it would feel like to crash on a strange planet where everyone feared you. The studio loved his idea, but they wanted more action, more suspense, more danger. So another writer named Harry Essex took Bradbury's treatment and turned it into a full screenplay. Essex added tension and fear, but he kept Bradbury's heart. He kept the idea that maybe, just maybe, the aliens weren't the real monsters. Maybe fear was. The final movie balanced both views. It had suspense and scares, but it also had sadness and understanding. You felt sorry for the creatures even while you feared them. Bradbury later said he loved the movie, even though it wasn't exactly what he wrote. He saw his desert in every frame. He saw his loneliness in every shadow. A poet's touch made all the difference. Number 19. The first Universal monster in 3 Dimensions. Universal Studios was famous for monsters. They made Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, and the creature from the Black Lagoon. But It Came from Outer Space was their very first monster movie made in 3D. Back in the early 1950s, 3D was the hottest new technology in Hollywood. Audiences were staying home to watch television, so studios needed something big and exciting to bring them back to theaters. 3D seemed like magic. Objects flew off the screen, rocks tumbled toward your face, hands reached out into the audience. Everyone wore special glasses with one red lens and one blue lens, and suddenly the flat screen had depth. The studio decided to test this new technology on a science fiction story because sci-fi fans loved new things. They wanted to be amazed. Director Jack Arnold had never made a 3D movie before, but he was fearless. He studied how the cameras worked. He learned that if you aimed things directly at the lens, the audience would gasp. So he filled the movie with moments designed to shock. A meteor streaks across the sky right at you. A telescope lens zooms forward. Rocks tumble down a mine shaft toward the camera. Hands suddenly appear in close-up, reaching out. It wasn't just a gimmick. Arnold used 3D to make you feel like you were standing in the desert with the characters, surrounded by emptiness and danger. When the movie opened, audiences screamed and ducked in their seats. They had never felt so inside a movie before. Critics called it one of the best uses of 3D ever made. It wasn't just a trick. It was storytelling. The monsters weren't just on the screen anymore. They were in the room with you. Number 18. The desert was the real star. The movie was filmed in the California desert, and the landscape wasn't just a background. It was a character. Director Jack Arnold loved wide, empty spaces. He believed that loneliness and fear grow bigger when there's nowhere to hide. So he took his cast and crew out to the desert near a small town and set up cameras under the blazing sun. The heat was unbearable. Actors sweated through their clothes. The crew had to cover the cameras with towels to keep them from overheating. There was no shade, no air conditioning, no relief. But Arnold kept filming. He wanted the audience to feel that heat, that emptiness, that sense of being small under a giant sky. He shot long, wide images where tiny human figures walked across endless sand and rock. The horizon stretched forever. The sky swallowed everything. At night, the desert became even stranger. The stars were so bright they looked fake. The darkness was so thick you couldn't see your own hand. Arnold filmed night scenes using huge lights that made the sand glow like the surface of the moon. It looked alien even though it was Earth. The desert also provided natural locations that saved the studio thousands of dollars. There was an old mine shaft that became the entrance to the alien spaceship's hiding place. There were rock formations that looked like something from another planet. There were roads that disappeared into nothing. The actors said it was the hardest shoot of their careers, but also the most beautiful. Every sunrise painted the rocks gold. Every sunset turned the sky purple and orange. The desert didn't just host the story. It told the story. Number 17. The alien eye that haunted a generation. If you've seen It Came from Outer Space, you never forget the alien eye. It's huge, glowing, and surrounded by a strange, rippling energy. It appears suddenly in the dark, staring right at you, and then it vanishes. That eye became one of the most famous images in 1950s science fiction. But it almost didn't exist. The special effects team struggled for weeks trying to figure out how to show the alien without showing too much. Director Jack Arnold didn't want a man in a rubber suit. He didn't want a puppet that looked cheap. He wanted something that felt truly alien, something your brain couldn't quite understand. One of the effects artists suggested using just an eye, one single, enormous eye that suggested a creature too strange to fully reveal. Arnold loved the idea. But how do you make a giant floating eye that glows and pulses? This was 1953. There were no computers, no digital effects. Everything had to be built by hand. The team created the eye using a combination of painted glass, lights, and a technique called optical printing, where you layered different pieces of film on top of each other. They filmed a painting of an eye. Then they filmed swirling, rippling patterns. Then they filmed glowing lights. Then they combined all the layers together, adjusting the timing so the eye seemed to breathe and pulse. It took dozens of attempts to get it right. When they finally showed it to Arnold, he sat in silence. Then he smiled. The eye was perfect. It was strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. When audiences saw it in 3D with the eye floating out into the theater, people screamed. Some covered their faces. Some children had nightmares for weeks. That eye became the icon of the film. One image, created with paint and light, haunted a generation. Number 16. The voices that came from nowhere. The aliens in the movie don't speak with mouths. They communicate telepathically, and their voices echo inside the minds of the human characters. Creating that effect was harder than you'd think. The sound designers wanted the alien voices to feel unnatural, like they were coming from inside your head instead of from the screen. Back in 1953, most movie sound was simple. People spoke into microphones, and the audio played through theater speakers. But the team working on It Came from Outer Space wanted something different, something that made your skin crawl. They recorded the alien dialogue in a normal voice first. Then they manipulated it. They added echo. They slowed it down slightly. They layered multiple voices on top of each other so it sounded like a chorus of whispers. They used a technique called reverb, which makes sound bounce and repeat as if it's happening in a vast, empty space. The final result was a voice that sounded calm and intelligent, but also cold and distant. It didn't sound angry or evil. It sounded alien. When the actors on set heard the alien voices during rehearsals, they said it gave them chills. It was easier to act scared because the fear felt real. The voices weren't shouting or threatening. They were simply other. They didn't belong. That made them more frightening than any growl or roar. Audiences in 1953 had never heard anything like it. The sound didn't come from the left or right. It came from everywhere and nowhere. It lived in the air. One reviewer wrote that the alien voices made him feel like his own thoughts were being invaded. That was exactly what the sound team wanted. They didn't just create a voice, they created a presence. Number 15. Barbara Rush was tougher than her character. Barbara Rush played Ellen Fields, the supportive girlfriend who spends much of the movie being scared and worried. But in real life, Rush was one of the toughest people on set. She was only 26 years old, and this was one of her first big Hollywood roles. The desert heat didn't bother her. The long hours didn't slow her down. The dangerous stunts didn't scare her. There's a scene where Ellen is taken over by the aliens, and her eyes go blank and her voice becomes cold and emotionless. Rush had to switch back and forth between being herself and being an alien copy in the same scene. It required perfect control over her face, her voice, her entire body. The director Jack Arnold said she nailed it on the first take almost every time. She understood that the alien version of Ellen wasn't just emotionless, she was sad. The aliens were imitating her, but they didn't understand feelings. Rush showed that loneliness in her performance. Her alien Ellen looked like a person, but something was missing. Something human. Off camera, Rush kept everyone's spirits up during the brutal desert shoot. She told jokes. She brought cold drinks from her trailer. She checked on the younger crew members to make sure they weren't getting heat stroke. The crew loved her. Years later, Rush said that It Came from Outer Space taught her that strong women don't always have to carry guns or fight monsters. Sometimes strength is about staying human when everything around you is falling apart. She brought warmth to a cold, scary movie. That warmth made the fear hit harder. Number 14. The meteor shower that started it all. The movie opens with one of the most beautiful and terrifying scenes in 1950 cinema, a meteor shower that lights up the night sky, and then one massive object streaks down and crashes into the desert. That scene set the tone for everything that followed, but filming it was nearly impossible. How do you show a meteor crashing to Earth when you're standing in a desert with a camera? The special effects team had to get creative. They couldn't afford to build a giant flaming prop and drop it from the sky. Instead, they used a combination of tricks. First, they filmed real footage of meteor showers that astronomers had captured on film. Then, they painted animation directly onto the film, frame by frame, to create the large meteor streaking toward Earth. They added glowing trails and fiery explosions using a technique called rotoscoping, where artists draw over live-action footage. For the actual crash, they built a small model of the desert landscape and filmed an explosion in miniature, then matched it with footage of the real desert. When they combined all these layers together, it looked seamless. The meteor seemed to tear through the sky and slam into the Earth with incredible force. In theaters, especially in 3D, the effect was breathtaking. The meteor appeared to fly over the audience's heads and crash beyond the screen. People gasped. Some ducked. The scene lasted less than 2 minutes, but it took weeks to create. Every second was carefully crafted. It was a perfect example of how creativity and hard work can overcome a small budget. The team didn't have $1 million, but they had imagination. And imagination, it turned out, was enough. Number 13. Richard Carlson did his own dangerous stunts. Richard Carlson played John Putnam, the amateur astronomer who witnesses the alien crash and spends the entire movie trying to convince everyone that something strange is happening. Carlson was a thoughtful, intelligent actor who loved science fiction, and he insisted on doing many of his own stunts. There's a scene where Putnam climbs down into a dark mine shaft, and the camera follows him as he carefully navigates loose rocks and narrow ledges. That wasn't a stunt double. That was Carlson. The mine was a real location, and it was genuinely dangerous. Rocks could shift. Ledges could crumble. The crew set up safety ropes, but Carlson wanted the scene to look real. So he asked them to keep the ropes out of the shot. He climbed down slowly, feeling his way, while the camera captured every careful step. Director Jack Arnold loved Carlson's commitment, but he was also terrified something would go wrong. He stationed crew members below with nets and pads just in case. Carlson made it through every take without injury, but he admitted later that his hands were shaking the whole time. There's another scene where Putnam runs through the desert at night, chasing after strange lights. The ground was uneven and full of rocks and cactus. Carlson could have easily twisted an ankle or fallen. But he ran full speed, again and again, until Arnold got the perfect shot. The actor believed that if the audience saw real effort and real danger, they would feel the fear more deeply. He was right. When you watch Carlson scramble through that mine or race across the desert, you believe he's terrified. Because part of him really was. Number 12. The script changed the alien invasion formula. Before It Came from Outer Space, almost every alien movie followed the same formula. Aliens arrive. Aliens attack. Humans fight back. Humans win. It was simple, patriotic, and safe. But this movie broke the formula. The aliens in It Came from Outer Space don't want to invade. They don't want to conquer. They're not evil. They're stranded, their spaceship crashed, and they're desperately trying to repair it so they can leave. They take on human forms not to infiltrate society, but to move around without causing panic. They're basically refugees, stuck on a hostile planet, surrounded by creatures who fear and misunderstand them. This was a radical idea in 1953, right in the middle of the Cold War, when fear of invasion from communists, from foreigners, from outsiders was everywhere. Writer Harry Essex and Ray Bradbury took a huge risk by making the aliens sympathetic. The studio worried that audiences would reject the idea. They wanted clear villains and heroes. But the filmmakers stood firm. They believed people were smart enough to handle a more complex story. And they were right. When the movie was released, some audiences were confused at first. They expected a battle. They expected explosions and victory. But what they got was a quiet, tense story about misunderstanding and fear. Some critics complained. But many others praised the film for being brave and thoughtful. Over time, It Came from Outer Space became recognized as one of the first science fiction films to suggest that maybe, just maybe, we're not always the good guys. Maybe sometimes fear makes us the monsters. That idea influenced dozens of films and TV shows that came later, from The Day the Earth Stood Still to E.T. to Arrival. One small movie changed the formula forever. Number 11. The cinematographer painted with shadows the director of photography on It Came from Outer Space was a man named Clifford Stein, and he was a master of light and shadow. He understood that what you don't see is often scarier than what you do. So he filled the movie with darkness. Deep, rich, beautiful darkness. He used a style called low-key lighting, where most of the frame is in shadow and only small areas are lit. This made every scene feel dangerous and uncertain. You never knew what was hiding just outside the light. Stein also loved contrast. He would place a brightly lit face against a pitch-black background, or light a character from below so their features looked strange and unsettling. In the desert scenes, he used the harsh sunlight to create stark, dramatic shadows that stretched across the sand like black fingers. At night, he used minimal lighting so the darkness felt thick and heavy. The actors sometimes couldn't see where they were walking. They had to trust the crew to guide them. But that uncertainty showed on their faces, and it made the performances feel more real. There's a moment in the film where a character walks into a dark building, and for several seconds the screen is almost completely black. You hear footsteps. You hear breathing. But you see almost nothing. Audiences lean forward, straining to see, and that's exactly what Stein wanted. He controlled your attention. He made you work for every glimpse. Some modern viewers complain that old black and white movies are too dark, that they can't see what's happening. But that darkness was a choice. It was an art form. Clifford Stein didn't just light a movie, he painted with shadows. Number 10. The music told you how to feel. The musical score for It Came from Outer Space was composed by a team of talented musicians working for Universal Studios, and they used a combination of traditional orchestra and strange experimental sounds. The music had two jobs: build tension and create a sense of the alien. For the tension, they used strings, violins and cellos playing long, slow notes that gradually grew louder and higher until your nerves were screaming. It's a technique that makes your body physically uncomfortable. Your heart beats faster. Your muscles tense. You want the sound to stop, but it just keeps building. For the alien presence, they used a theremin, one of the weirdest instruments ever invented. You play it without touching it. You move your hands near two metal antennas, and it creates a wailing, wavering sound that doesn't quite sound like anything else. It sounds electronic, but also organic. It sounds like a voice, but not human. The theremin became the sound of science fiction in the 1950s, and It Came from Outer Space used it beautifully. Every time the aliens appeared, the theremin would sing its eerie song. The music also knew when to disappear. Some of the scariest scenes in the movie have no music at all, just silence, footsteps, and breathing. The silence made the sudden bursts of music even more shocking. The composers understood that silence is a kind of music too. It's the music of waiting, of dread, of something about to happen. When you watch the film, you might not consciously notice the score. But your body notices. Your emotions notice. The music is guiding you, telling you when to be afraid and when to relax. It's invisible storytelling. Number 9. The telephone poles that became iconic. There's a recurring image in It Came from Outer Space that's simple but unforgettable. Telephone poles stretching across the desert, standing like silent sentinels against the empty sky. Director Jack Arnold used these poles throughout the film as a symbol of human presence in a vast, indifferent landscape. They represent connection, communication, civilization, but in the movie they also represent isolation. The poles go on forever, but there's no one around. The wires carry voices across the emptiness, but those voices are often filled with fear and confusion. Arnold shot the poles from low angles so they looked tall and ominous. He framed them against the sky so they looked like crosses or grave markers. In several scenes, characters stand near the poles, dwarfed by their height, looking small and alone. The poles weren't just set decoration. They were part of the story's emotional landscape. There's one particularly famous shot where the camera looks down a long desert road, and telephone poles line both sides, creating a tunnel of perspective that vanishes into the distance. It's a beautiful, haunting image that suggests both infinity and entrapment. You could walk forever and never reach the end. Film scholars later pointed out that the telephone poles also represent the way technology connects us, but doesn't always bring us closer. We can talk to each other across great distances, but we still misunderstand. We still fear. The poles in the movie carry warnings and panic, not comfort. Arnold probably didn't plan all these layers of meaning when he set up his camera. He just knew the image felt right. He knew it looked lonely and strange. Sometimes the best symbols aren't planned. They're discovered. Number 8. The town that played itself. The small desert town in the movie wasn't a Hollywood set. It was a real place. and the production used real locations and real buildings. The diner, the gas station, the sheriff's office, these were actual places where actual people lived and worked. The town's residents were excited to have a movie filmed there, and many of them appeared as extras. If you watch closely, you can see real locals in the background, playing townspeople who are confused and frightened by the strange events. Some of them had never acted before. They just showed up, put on costumes, and did what the director told them. Their awkwardness actually helped the movie. They didn't move or talk like professional actors. They moved and talked like real people, and that made the town feel authentic. The production paid the town a small fee for using their locations, and that money helped keep some local businesses running. It was 1953, and small desert towns were struggling. The modern world was passing them by. So having a Hollywood film crew arrive was like a miracle. It brought jobs, excitement, and a little bit of glamour to a forgotten place. Years later, some of the locals said that week of filming was one of the best times of their lives. They got to be part of something bigger. They got to see their town on the big screen. The movie gave them a kind of immortality. Even after the buildings crumbled and the businesses closed, the town would live forever in the film. Every time someone watches It Came from Outer Space, that little desert town comes back to life. The past never really dies, it just moves to the movies. Number 7. The alien transformation scene that pushed boundaries. One of the most technically ambitious scenes in the film is when the aliens transform from their true forms into human duplicates. The transformation isn't shown as a quick flash or a simple cut. It's a slow, unsettling process where you see a human face ripple and distort, then shift into something alien, then shift back. This was incredibly difficult to achieve in 1953. The effects team used a technique called morphing, but it wasn't digital morphing like we have today. It was optical morphing, done entirely with film, lights, and precise timing. Here's how they did it. They filmed the actor's face in normal light. Then they filmed the same actor's face with strange lighting and distorted lenses that made their features look stretched and unnatural. Then they filmed the alien eye and other alien elements. Then, in the lab, they used a device called an optical printer to slowly dissolve from one image to another, blending them together frame by frame. The process was painstaking. If the timing was off by even a fraction of a second, the effect looked fake. The team spent days adjusting and readjusting until the transformation looked smooth and believable. When audiences saw it, they were amazed. It looked like magic. People wondered how it was done. Some thought the actors were wearing special makeup that changed under different lights. Others thought it was a camera trick. It was both, and more. The transformation scene became one of the most talked about moments in the film. It showed that science fiction didn't have to rely on men in rubber suits. With creativity and technical skill, filmmakers could show the impossible. The scene also carried emotional weight. Watching a familiar face twist into something alien was deeply disturbing. It suggested that the people you know and trust might not be who they seem. That fear resonated with audiences in the 1950s, and it still resonates today. Number 6. Jack Arnold's philosophy of fear. Director Jack Arnold had a clear philosophy about what makes science fiction scary, and he applied it to every frame of It Came from Outer Space. He believed that fear comes from the familiar becoming unfamiliar. A desert is just a desert until something crashes there. A friend is just a friend until their eyes go blank. A quiet town is safe until it isn't. Arnold didn't fill the movie with jump scares or loud noises. He built dread slowly and carefully. He showed you normal life, let you relax, and then introduced one small strange detail. A shadow that moves wrong. A voice that sounds slightly off. A person who doesn't blink. These tiny wrongnesses add up until your whole sense of reality feels unstable. Arnold also believed in trusting the audience's imagination. He famously said, "The audience will always imagine something scarier than what you can show them." That's why he rarely showed the aliens in full. He gave you glimpses, an eye, a claw, a strange silhouette, and let your mind fill in the rest. Your imagination became part of the movie. Arnold's approach influenced an entire generation of filmmakers. Directors like Steven Spielberg, John Carpenter, and Ridley Scott all studied Arnold's work and learned from his techniques. The shower scene in Psycho, the unseen shark in Jaws, the shadows in Alien, all of these owe something to Jack Arnold's philosophy. He understood that the monster you don't see is always scarier than the monster you do. He also understood that science fiction, at its best, isn't really about aliens or spaceships. It's about us. It's about how we react when the world stops making sense. Arnold made low-budget B-movies, but he made them with the care and thought of an artist. He turned simple stories into poetry. Number 5. The script's buried message about prejudice beneath the surface of It Came from Outer Space is a story about prejudice and fear of the other. The aliens are different. They look different, think different, communicate different. And because they're different, the humans immediately assume they're dangerous. The townspeople form a mob. They grab guns. They want to hunt down and destroy the creatures before even trying to understand them. Only one person, John Putnam, tries to communicate. Only he suggests that maybe the aliens aren't enemies. Maybe they're just lost and scared. This theme wasn't accidental. Ray Bradbury, who created the original story, was deeply concerned with issues of tolerance and understanding. He had seen how fear and prejudice could destroy communities. He lived through World War II and watched Japanese Americans being sent to internment camps just because of how they looked. He saw the paranoia of the early Cold War, where neighbors accused neighbors of being communist spies. Bradbury wanted to tell a story that asked a simple question. What if the monsters we fear are just people we don't understand? Harry Essex, who wrote the screenplay, kept that theme alive. He made the humans in the story flawed and fearful. They're not evil, but they're not heroes either. They're just scared, and fear makes them dangerous. The aliens, meanwhile, are calm and rational. They don't want to hurt anyone. They just want to go home. The movie quietly suggests that the real danger isn't the aliens. It's our reaction to them. Of course, in 1953, this message had to be subtle. If the movie had been too obvious, it might have been seen as un-American or sympathetic to enemies. So the filmmakers buried the theme beneath the sci-fi adventure. But it's there, waiting for anyone who looks closely. The movie invites you to ask, who are the real monsters? Number 4. The lost ending that changed everything. The ending of It Came from Outer Space that audiences saw in theaters wasn't the original ending. There was another version, darker and more ambiguous, that was filmed but never used. In the final cut, the aliens repair their ship and leave Earth peacefully. John Putnam watches them go, relieved and a little sad. The town returns to normal. It's a hopeful ending, but in the original version, the ending was less certain. After the aliens leave, Putnam stands in the desert and looks up at the stars. He realizes that the universe is full of life, and Earth has been visited before and will be visited again. He understands that humanity is not alone and not in control, and possibly not ready for what's out there. The final shot was supposed to be Putnam's face, filled with wonder and terror, as the camera slowly pulled back to show how small he was against the vast desert and the endless sky. It was beautiful and unsettling. But test audiences didn't like it. They found it too depressing. They wanted reassurance. They wanted to leave the theater feeling safe. So the studio cut the darker ending and replaced it with a simpler, more optimistic one. Director Jack Arnold was disappointed but not surprised. He knew that studios were cautious about challenging audiences too much. The darker ending was stored in the vault and eventually lost. No one knows if it still exists. Film historians have searched for it, but so far It's never been found. All we have are descriptions from people who saw early test screenings. They say it was haunting. They say it changed the whole meaning of the film. One lost minute of footage, and the entire story shifts. It's a reminder that movies are fragile. They're made through 1,000 small decisions, and sometimes the most important decisions are the ones that get erased. Number 3. The alien design that was never fully revealed, the full alien creature design for It Came from Outer Space, was created by a talented artist, but it was intentionally kept hidden from audiences. The production built a complete alien costume, with a full body, limbs, and a detailed head. It was strange and beautiful, organic, but not quite like any Earth creature. The design suggested something that evolved under a different sun, with different rules. But director Jack Arnold made a crucial decision. He would never show it in full light. He would only show pieces. A clawed hand reaching out. A shadow moving across a wall. The glowing eye. A silhouette in the distance. Arnold believed that the moment you show a monster completely, it becomes less scary. It becomes a thing you can understand, categorize, and dismiss. But if you only show fragments, the monster stays in the realm of nightmare. It stays unknown. The creature suit was used during filming. Actors and stunt performers wore it for certain scenes, and other actors reacted to it. But the camera angles, lighting, and editing ensured that audiences only got brief, partial glimpses. Some crew members took photographs of the full costume, and a few of those photos have surfaced over the years. The alien looks insect-like, with smooth, curved surfaces and multiple limbs. It's elegant in a disturbing way. Fans of the film have debated for decades whether Arnold made the right choice. Some wish they could have seen the creature in all its glory. Others believe that keeping it hidden was a stroke of genius. What's certain is that the decision made the film more memorable. Decades later, people still talk about the alien they never quite saw. The mystery became part of the legend. Sometimes what you hide is more powerful than what you show. Number 2. The 3D that almost destroyed the film. It Came from Outer Space was a huge success in 3D, but the technology almost destroyed the film's legacy. Here's why. 3D in the 1950s required 2 strips of film projected simultaneously through special lenses. The 2 images overlapped to create the illusion of depth. But if the projectionist didn't align the projectors perfectly, the image would blur and the 3D effect would fail. Audiences would get headaches. They'd complain. The movie would flop. And many projectionists in 1953 didn't know how to handle 3D properly. It was new and complicated. So the studio had to send technicians to theaters all over the country to train projectionists and set up the equipment. It was expensive and time-consuming. Even worse, 3D prints were fragile. The film could warp or tear, and if one projector broke down, the whole show was ruined. Within a few years, the 3D fad faded. Audiences got tired of wearing glasses. Theater owners got tired of the extra work and expense. Studios stopped making 3D films. And It Came from Outer Space was re-released in standard 2D, with 1 projector and 1 strip of film. All the carefully planned 3D effects were flattened. The meteor didn't fly at you, the alien hand didn't reach out. The depth and immersion were gone. For decades, the only way to see the film was in this flat, diminished version. An entire generation of film fans watched It Came from Outer Space without experiencing what made it special. It wasn't until the digital age, when technology allowed 3D films to be restored and presented properly, that the movie could be seen as it was meant to be. Now, thanks to Blu-ray and digital restoration, you can watch the film in 3D at home and finally see what 1950s audiences saw. The meteor streaks toward you. The alien eye floats in your living room. The desert surrounds you. The film lives again. Number 1. the movie that taught Spielberg and Lucas It Came from Outer Space, is one of the most influential science fiction films ever made, and its impact can be seen in the work of the greatest filmmakers of the next generation. Steven Spielberg watched it as a child and was mesmerized. He later said that the film taught him how to build suspense and how to make the ordinary feel extraordinary. The scene where the meteor crashes into the desert inspired the opening of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The idea of sympathetic aliens who just want to go home became the heart of E.T., the extraterrestrial. George Lucas also studied Jack Arnold's work when he was learning to make films. He admired Arnold's ability to tell big, emotional stories on small budgets. The desert landscapes in Star Wars echo the empty, haunting deserts of It Came from Outer Space. Ridley Scott, John Carpenter, James Cameron, all of them cite 1950s science fiction as foundational, and It Came from Outer Space was one of the key films of that era. It showed that sci-fi didn't have to be silly or cheap. It could be beautiful. It could be thoughtful. It could ask important questions about humanity, fear, and the unknown. The film also proved that you didn't need massive special effects to create a sense of wonder. You needed imagination, atmosphere, and heart. You needed to care about the characters and the ideas. The success of It Came from Outer Space helped convince studios that science fiction was a legitimate genre, worthy of investment and respect. It paved the way for everything that came after. When you watch modern sci-fi blockbusters, you're watching the grandchildren of this quiet black and white film from 1953. The Dina is still there. The wonder, the fear, the empathy. The movie didn't just entertain, it taught. Bonus fact, the sound that came from a broken piano. Here's a secret that almost no one knows. One of the most iconic sounds in It Came from Outer Space, the strange resonant hum that accompanies the alien presence, was created by accident using a broken piano. The sound design team was experimenting in the studio, trying to find a noise that felt alien and unsettling. They tried electronic devices. They tried animal sounds played backward. They tried scraping metal and glass. Nothing felt right. Then, one of the sound engineers noticed an old upright piano in the corner of the studio. It had broken strings and a damaged soundboard. He opened the back of the piano and plucked one of the broken strings. It made a deep, vibrating hum that seemed to go on forever, echoing and fading in strange ways. He recorded it. Then he slowed the recording down, layered it with other sounds, and added reverb. The result was a low, thrumming pulse that felt both mechanical and organic. It sounded like a heartbeat, but not human. It sounded like a machine, but alive. The director loved it. That broken piano string became the sonic signature of the alien ship. Every time the ship is near, you hear that deep, resonant hum. It gets inside your chest. It makes you uneasy without knowing why. The sound team never told anyone how they made it. They were afraid people would think it was too simple, too cheap. But simplicity was the genius. A broken string, a tape recorder, and a little imagination created a sound that defined an entire film. Decades later, other filmmakers tried to recreate that hum using synthesizers and computers, but it never sounded quite the same. The original had a warmth and texture that came from wood and wire and happy accident. Old tools, new magic. It Came from Outer Space wasn't just a monster movie. It was a story about fear, loneliness, and the courage to see beyond what frightens us. It was made by artists who believed that science fiction could be more than entertainment. It could be a mirror, showing us who we are and who we might become. The desert, the darkness, the glowing eye, the haunting music, all of it came together to create something that still resonates 70 years later. The film reminds us that the unknown isn't always our enemy. Sometimes it's just different. Sometimes it's lost. Sometimes it needs our help, not our fear. And maybe, just maybe, if we put down our weapons and open our hearts, we might learn something beautiful. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time. The past is full of wonder. Let's keep exploring it together.